Whenever we hear or read about other people, our empathy takes over. Us humans have the everlasting desire to think or even feel for others.
So, whenever we see, hear, or read about someone, our thoughts and feelings travel to a world of imagination.
And we do it all the time, when imagining to be a superhero, a construction worker, or even a guy on the street. But what if a person is somewhat out of the ordinary?
Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be them? Well, we certainly have.
With this podcast series, we unravel stories of the sometimes fascinating, obsessed, inspiring, or outright strange folks that have wandered the edges of this earth. So, who this? Welcome to our podcast. How far would you go to be your true self? Would you walk the plank? Join us, we're about to make a splash. Welcome, so you're here with Shah, Joe, and Martin, and today we're going to talk about a story of love, piracy, and unparalleled freedom. But before we get into it, when you guys think of pirates, what comes to your mind?
Yeah. I mean, at this point, Jack Sparrow, I guess. Pirates of the Caribbean. Dude talks funny.
Johnny Depp.
Dreaded beard.
Wooden leg.
A wooden leg.
Parrot.
Yeah. Big old raggedy ship.
Mm-hmm.
Men who drink
Ding,
rum.
ding, 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 ding,
but
ding.
like one girl.
One girl?
Yeah,
Who?
like in the crew.
Interesting.
I said that's the ratio.
Uh-huh. That's interesting, because way back in the day, women weren't allowed on pirate cruise ships.
That gets your facts straight, Joe.
Yeah, Joe. Well, let me paint you a different picture of one of the most legendary pirates of all time, whose story I'm sure you won't have heard. This is the saga of Anne Cormac, or Andy to her father. Anne was born at the turn of the 18th century in Ireland to her lawyer father, William Cormac, and his maid, Mary Brennan. To escape his wife's family and the chaos that would have ensued raising an illegitimate daughter, William moved to London and started dressing Anne as a boy and calling her Andy. And so began her metamorphosis from Anne to Andy. After his wife cut him off financially, William thought, why not try his luck across the pond and move to Charlestown, Carolina, with Anne and her mother, who unfortunately died when she was 12. It's believed that Anne had red hair and a fiery temper, apparently stabbing a servant girl with a knife when she was just 13 years old. Fast forward a few years, and Anne marries a poor sailor and small-time pirate James Bonny. And as many fathers do, William disapproved of James and kicked Anne out of the house. Some histories also say that Anne set fire to her father's plantation in retaliation, but no evidence exists, so we don't really know. At this point, what do you think William envisioned for Anne? Why is he so against James, and what's Anne thinking at this point?
I hate to say it, but I feel like she's a bit privileged and is having like some rowdy teenage angst sort of rebellion.
Why do you think she's privileged?
You said plantation in South Carolina?
Yeah, that's true. The story is actually that he had no money and they moved to the US and not no money, but he was being supported by his wife, whom disowned him because of the whole illegitimate daughter. And then they moved to the US so that he could try and make his way as a lawyer. It didn't really work out. But eventually, he comes into a lot of money through business.
Okay, but then while did she run away before or after? But the whole point, I think that was my first impression.
Fair enough.
Just completely honest, yeah. But I'm thinking, like he's trying to climb the social ladder. He wants her to marry rich. The whole Southern Belle, aristocracy stuff, like still the British Empire. I feel like there's a lot of pressure around marriage.
I mean, or he just thinks that no man is good enough for her.
That, maybe not a pirate.
But that is throwing her out of the house.
Yeah.
I mean, but we know that he absolutely adores her, like was willing to uproot his life from Ireland to London to the US.
That's true.
With his illegitimate daughter.
Yeah.
Going to the effort of
Wait,
dressing her as a
question.
boy. Yeah.
At what point did she stop being a boy? When they moved to the US?
History doesn't really document that.
Mm.
Like, we don't know if she was presented as a boy in the US. I guess not. I think it was more in London.
Yeah, that would make sense, I guess.
But then later in the story, you'll find out.
There was no more reason to hide.
Yeah, because it was, you know, new land, new opportunity. Freedom!
New continent, new me.
Okay, what happened then?
So then between 1714 and 1718, so Anne would have been between 17 and 21 years old, Anne and hubby James moved to Nassau in the Bahamas, also lovingly known as the Republic of Pirates. So basically it was a sanctuary for pirates where Anne really finds her true calling. But first, James becomes a rat for the new governor in town. I'm sure Anne wouldn't admit it, but I reckon her father was right. James was a snake and Anne was an eagle. Unsurprising then that Anne spent her time with pirates and taverns, taking famed Captain Calico Jack as her lover. And then the story repeats itself. Her husband James, another man self-deluded into thinking that Anne was his possession and that she would just obey his demands, finds out about the affair, threatens to beat Calico Jack, and brings Anne to Governor Rogers for an adulterous whipping.
Whoa.
Wow, okay.
Finally, Anne spreads her wings and joins Calico Jack's crew disguised as a man, and that's how she became a pirate.
So, question: How do you actually become a pirate, or why would you even want to become a pirate?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of romanticize it today, right? Because they were drawn to freedom and, you know, like this whole buckling, like adventuring stuff. But that's, I think definitely that's our modern perspective because we have, like, you know, pretty sedentary lives. And so we dream big. But I mean, I think what's closer to the truth is these were people who were in some form rejected by society. And I kind of see how she would feel that way too. I mean, you kind of were robbed of your identity as a kid. You know, you were taken to a whole different strange continent. I'm sure your dad had the best intentions for you, but at that point you were, I can imagine she was already very jaded by the whole process of, you know, everything being decided for her.
Mm-hmm.
And still, she's a woman, so there's not like many ways you could take care of yourself if you did run away. So yeah, I would break the law too if I were her. I don't know.
I think it's also like the rebellion in her, no? Like it's like this rebellious nature that I feel like most people drawn to piracy must have inside of them.
Yeah, sure. I think rebellion and also necessity. Like,
yeah, combination, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, what's her alternative? That's also a question, right? Women at the time, probably the role that they had was be a wife to a husband.
Yeah.
What's the adventure there? Like if you have the option to actually travel around and decide what you want to do, that's, I guess, a better alternative.
I think it comes down to very individual, like day-to-day freedom, because let's not forget, it's not like she was living on the Bahamas with James, who is working for the governor. So in a way, social status, pretty okay. I'm sure he was providing, but she really didn't like that he was snitching on the other pirates. That was the thing. So I think she also is just like very strong-willed, independent-minded. Like, I don't like you. I don't.
Right, yeah. She didn't need to be a pirate. She wasn't starving. She wasn't in need.
I think she needed to, in terms of her soul. I don't think she financially or like materially needed to, but that's what makes her so fascinating.
In context, piracy was a bit of a trendy thing. I think, because it's like it's the heyday of piracy. They were close to the Caribbean where piracy was blossoming. It might have had that appeal as well. It's like
kind of like biker gangs.
No, I mean,
had for people in
like
the
if
50s
you're
and
if
stuff.
you're extremely poor and you don't see a lot of options to make a lot of money, to provide for your family, then it sounds perhaps too good to be true in most cases. Or let's say you are on a boat for the Royal Navy or a sailor in one other shape or form. It's a terrible life to begin with. At least the things that I've read about it is that you're oftentimes starving, at least on a boat full of pirates. The things that I've seen is that there is some shape or form of equality, and you do actually get to own the things that you steal. I think that's better than eating maggots and old bread.
It's a cooperative piracy. You know, you get what you put in. It's nice.
So was she able to be the person that she wanted to be on the boat?
So there are a lot of accounts of her dressing like a man, drinking, swearing, fighting. She loved fighting. Yeah, I think I wanted to also talk about it from the perspective of her journey as a woman, right? So she's a young girl. She's been born into this illegitimate thing and she has to be hidden and moved to another place. Then there she's living basically a kind of secret, fraudulent life. And then she moves, she's a young teenager, so probably growing boobs and all of that jazz. And living in the US, no mother, only with her father, who has very strong ideas about who she should be with because he disapproved of the husband. And then she's on the Bahamas and her husband sounds like an idiot. And she is spending all this time in taverns, kind of mingling with these pirates. I'm sure she was very charming and really enjoyed kind of that feeling, perhaps. And yeah, I'm so curious about what drove her, that it seems like she kind of was going through her life just totally on her own. And that's really cool that she, found herself on Calico Jack's ship.
So when you mentioned you wanted to talk about Anne, I knew there was a relation to Calico Jack, and then I looked it up, and then you realize that Calico Jack is actually a very famous pirate. But why is he famous? He's actually popular because of her, and I found that really interesting because it says a lot about history and how we want to tell history through a man's perspective and not... Because he's not famous for anything else than being in a relationship with her. So why do we want to tell the story from his eyes and not from her eyes?
Yep, you just hit the nail on the head.
Ouch.
So here's the plot twist. Anne was not the only woman dressed as a man on board Calico Jack's ship. Enter Mary Read, fellow trailblazer, living her best life as a manly pirate among scallywags. Can you guess what happens when Anne meets Mary?
They recognize that they just wear men's clothing and they're both
Wait, I
women?
don't think they were not pretending to be guys all along, were they?
They were?
What?
Yeah?
Oh.
Only Calico Jack knew that Anne was a woman.
You're not
Really?
allowed to be a woman on the
I mean,
pirate ship.
It's illegal, Joe.
everything they're doing is illegal.
Exactly. One of the fucking, the many ironies. But okay.
That's extra illegal.
All right.
So
okay,
you don't know
this
what
whole
happens
time,
when they meet.
I'm sure. Is it sexist if I say they kiss?
Well, it's close, but it's not. Maybe it is a bit sex. No, it's okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Why do you think they kiss?
I don't know.
Why would a man and a man kiss? Because they think that each other are men, right?
They're very attractive men.
Yeah,
is
they're
that
both
normal
attractive
for
men.
pirate men to kiss?
I'm sure it was.
Well, I mean, in the
Like,
way that
it
it's
has to
normal
be.
for, guys in jail to
Yeah, but it's like
get it
guys
on.
on a.
You're on a boat for months. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
things happen.
Okay, so for those reasons, perhaps. But no, let's expand beyond, necessity, because Anne fell in love immediately, unaware that Mary was also a woman. And in her attempts to seduce Mary, Anne revealed herself as a woman, and then Mary followed. So, okay, everyone's tits were out the bag. And I wasn't surprised to find out how Calico Jack reacted at first. Super jealous of Mary because Anne's super attracted to her. And then when he realized that they were both women, he quickly got over it. Phew, no dicks involved.
That's sexist on his part, not yours.
So how does their story end?
What did Calico think?
Calico was cool with it all.
What a
maybe
frat
he was,
boy.
Maybe he got off on women.
Yeah, what an
with
absolute
women.
frat boy.
But
He
I
was
mean,
probably like,
they were
"Nice."
pretending to be men,
is
so
so
he
hot.
This is so
he
hot,
mustn't.
dude.
He definitely wasn't okay with it until the point he realized that it was.
There was no dicks involved, and he was like,
He
yeah,
was
that's
in
fine.
on it. He knew
Yeah,
because
yeah,
he
okay.
knew that Anne was a woman. Then he found out that
Okay.
Mary was a
Yeah,
woman
yeah.
and that they were into
Yeah.
each other. History doesn't say that he had a problem with it. In 1720, Calico Jack's ship was discovered by pirate hunters. Basically, there was a battle. The men cowered in the hold, scared for their lives, under the ship, while Mary Read and Anne Bonny fought to the death.
The detail is that they were drunk, right?
Well, they were super drunk. That's a really important
okay.
detail. They were so drunk, and I like to think that they were cowards drinking. But Anne and Mary, always up for a fight. They were on top of the deck, fighting to the death. Unfortunately, they were eventually overpowered and Jack surrendered. But that wasn't the end of Bonny and Read. While the men rotted in prison and awaited their sentences, the two women, quote unquote, pleaded the belly, and they were spared execution for the sake of their unborn babies. And when Anne went to visit Jack in prison, she uttered some of the most famous words in pirate history. She said, "I'm sorry to see you here," she said, "but if you had fought like a man, you need not have hanged like a dog." What do we think? Is that the ultimate fuck you or what?
Yeah.
Pretty big fuck you.
I mean, maybe that was their banter. Who knows?
Maybe.
That's the way
He
they
was
talk.
like,
They were
hot.
talking to. Yeah, it's like that's the way I talk to you all the time. But bleeding the belly means they're pregnant. You say like,
Indeed, yeah.
okay, and were they pregnant?
They were. And Mary Read actually died in prison. The story goes that it was fever from her child's labor birth.
It feels like coincidence that they were both pregnant at the same time.
By who?
Well, this is the interesting, but this is also the mystery of Anne and the thing that I love most about her story. But maybe I'll save that for the end. I want to hear your thoughts on Anne and Mary. Like hearing about their story. You'd never heard of them before.
No.
She sounds savage. Like I think in all senses of the word. Like
Stabbing someone at 13.
yeah, that's pretty savage. Insulting your lover who took you in, pretty savage. Almost unempathetic, I have to say. Like I'm sure that, in that epic last battle, like they were probably cowarding. That's in my head canon. That's what's happening, that they were caught by surprise. And it was just Anne and Mary, who were like the most gung-ho and ready to fight and like reacted the quickest. But I don't know. I kind of feel a little bad for Calico for being...
That's super interesting. Maybe that's why history centers him and not them.
Maybe.
Because we can relate to the people that are most like us, right?
Yeah.
So you can relate to Calico, I can relate to Anne. And maybe that's fine. It's just important that we also open our eyes, minds, hearts, whatever, to the people we don't immediately relate to.
That's
and
true.
it's interesting to see that the actual people on the boat who were the most, between brackets, manly, were not men in the end, right?
Or maybe we need to redefine
I
manly.
think,
but
yeah, that's why I said between brackets, because that's...
for another discussion.
Yeah, no, because that's the actual truth of it. It's not, doesn't have anything to do with gender. They were, I guess, meant to be on that boat. They were living the way they wanted to live their lives, and they were brave souls, thieves nonetheless, but brave pirates for sure. If you're the only two fighting on the boat and everyone is drunk and cowarding away, then you're brave. But I think it's a very interesting story. But The thing that stood out for me was the fact that they are not given the space in history that someone like Calico Jack actually got, even though does he really deserve to be?
Yeah, that's right. Because the name sounds familiar to me, whereas none of the others do. And I can't tell if it's because it sounds funny, and I'm like, oh yeah, Calico Jack, that sounds like such a piratey name. But it could be that, but I don't think it is. I think I actually have heard the name Calico Jack, but if he didn't really do anything, and he's famous because of the 2 girls that he had on the ship, yeah.
So what's your takeaway, Charlotte?
Yeah.
So I came across Anne and Mary because they are currently statues outside of a home stadium of a small football club in the UK called Lewes, which is currently the only football club in the world that splits their resources equally between the men's and women's teams. That's just a plug because I think they're amazing. And I have played football since I was small, so can very much relate to how men interact with you when they find out that you play football and they think they're better than you, and you know, the standard. But it's like a proxy for generally this, you know, superior inferior dynamic between genders. And the sculptor Amanda Cotton named the statue Inexorable, which is a synonym for like inevitable or unstoppable. And it stands for the idea that you can live free and without constraint, and that the piece should serve as a reminder that you can live authentically as yourself, which I think that's the main, you know, thread to take away, that Anne and Mary were able to live authentically as themselves in a very, you know, peculiar and, untraditional setting. So I'm taking away from their story today that no matter how impossibly repressive a situation or environment can be, there is a way out or a small opening that you can find. I think you have to persist, but I think you also have to, or I have to, remind myself that, you know, you only get one vessel, right? So your relationship to yourself, and I think it's more, you have to go internal before you go external. So if we talk about authenticity, like for sure, I think we can all, well, I'm going to speak for myself. I can relate to feeling pressure and, you know, as a woman, but as a human, I think as well, depending on your age or your family or social, whatever. And yeah, I'm going to try to pivot on inner authenticity and then try to externalize that as consistently as I can. You know, it's not about perfection.
That's great.
But kids, we're not promoting piracy at all.
No, not at all. But I think I actually wanted to end with this like last part of her legend, and that is that nobody actually knows what happened to Anne. So there's no record of her being released from prison. There's no record of her dying. And so she disappeared. And I think for her, that was the ultimate freedom. Not even history could contain her. So like the ending of her story is hers and hers alone. And that for me is like the most powerful thing. Nobody else can write your story. Thank you for sailing with us on this journey of self-discovery. Catch us next week wherever you listen to your podcasts.